And as Kemi Badenoch said very, very clearly yesterday in a video that I put out earlier on my tweet account and also Instagram and Facebook, and that is that she said, we've got to stop these Palestinian marches. I'm not so sure I agree with her on that, because I believe very much in the right to demonstrate, and the right of democracy, and the right of free elections, and the right of free press. You have to do something about the vile comments that are coming from
it's
these
the
Palestinian
incite
demonstrators.
to violence that is really the borderline, and that is not being upheld. In fact, now in Australia, it's illegal to say from the river to the sea, because that's the end of the Jews, basically, in Israel. It's the end of Israel. So,
well, I'm happy to hear that. Yeah,
to violence, but that's the only country. And look what had to happen before they took action like that. So what will it take Britain to do to say, okay, no violent talk? If you want to go and demonstrate for your country or where you feel loyalty of some sort, that's fine. We're not stopping your freedom of speech, but the whole, it's the same in America. They just dropped the whole First Amendment when it says, no, you cannot yell fire in a theater. Well, there's a lot of fires being yelled out there all over the place. And it seems like it's legitimate, like they rewrote the First Amendment. It's not okay.
It's not okay. That's right. I mean, let me just clarify what Kemi Badenoch said, the leader of the Conservative Party, the first African, the first Black leader. And in terms of the results from the election, people say that they like Kemi. They like what she's saying.
Yes.
They like how she's actually put together the party after the disastrous last few years of the Conservative Party. She has really held it together very, very well. She's lost a few MPs and people have moved over to the Reform, but nevertheless, she has done well. She's a great friend of the Jewish community. She's a great friend of Israel, and she really is. And her statement yesterday was, look, I just can see that those people in Sudan, the real women and babies that are being massacred in Sudan as we speak right now, and as the UN have said, the worst humanitarian disaster, and they've been saying this for the last 2.5 years, but very few people know about this. There are no marches for that. The Uyghur Muslims in China, there are no marches for that. We didn't see many marches when it came to the Syrians being bombed by Bashar al-Assad. So she's saying it's a double standard, and she's definitely right on that. Now, what I would suggest is that although I believe very much in the right to have your say on the streets, but it has to be under certain conditions. So maybe it could be a static demonstration. In other words, instead of marching all the way from the BBC on Portland Place, very close to Oxford Circus, all the way down Oxford Street towards Marble Arch, and then heading towards number 10 Downing Street or Westminster, because you need a huge amount of police that the country doesn't have at the moment, because the police are leaving in droves and they can't recruit new police officers. So they're taking police from across the country to manage these demonstrations. And therefore, if that's the case, then you need to think twice about these demonstrations. To have it going on twice, sometimes 3 times a week, it's not just once a week now, it's 3 times a week. So yes, I believe in the right to say what you want within reason, providing it doesn't incite violence or hatred or racism. That's a grey line, so we have to discuss exactly what that grey line is. But at the same time, you cannot keep putting these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of police officers, taking them from across the country just so they can march and make sure there's no trouble. And it normally ends up there is trouble. And normally when the sun goes down, there are gangs that come in, start fighting with the police, as I've shown on many videos taken on Saturdays. And this is the issue. So maybe have it in a park, have it static, have them kept in. But they will insist, no, we don't want this. This is against our democratic rights. So this is the problem. So maybe Kemi is right to say, well, if you don't want that, then we stop the whole thing, or maybe do it once a month, not 3 times a week. Things like this. This is discussed, but you need a leader who's going to actually stand up, like maybe Kemi or Nigel Farage, and actually implement it and say there's no ifs or buts about this. You actually take this forward. And with Keir Starmer, you don't have that. Say, well, we're very concerned about the Jewish community and we're giving more money over and we're putting some more police officers in there as well. And of course, they're angry with us and we understand. Words, fantastic.
Yeah, lip service all night. Yeah. Well, I think also the problem and the reason that they aren't pro what's going on in Syria or look to aid Yemen or Syria or any of these places is because it's not really that they're so pro-Palestinian. There are so many things they could have done for the Palestinians. I think all these marches are just anti-Israel or anti-Semitic marches. They're not pro anything. If their hearts were really in the right place, they would have done a lot more for the Palestinian people. They could have raised money. They could have sent things over there. You know, the last flotilla that went over there, they said it was humanitarian aid. And what was it? They found weapons on board to arm Hamas against Israel. It's nothing to do with supporting the Palestinians. It's about getting rid of Israel. And that's why they want to chant from the river to the sea, because that's what it's about. It's not about, please help us help the Palestinians. Can we raise some money? Can we send clothing, food, goods? Can we take some of these immigrants in? Can we petition our government to help these people? It's none of that. It's all about throw the Jews into the sea. That's what it's all about. So I don't know. Maidenoch, I think, has it right. I think she knows. She's a wonderful supporter. I hope she comes to Israel. It'd be wonderful to meet her. And I think it's in some ways it was a shame that she lost so many MPs after all her hard work, because they definitely took their people with them and their constituencies with them. And I think the Conservative under her has some real promise. And we'll have to see what happens in the next 3 years. But I don't think the Conservative Party is over, but I do think that it could be the Labour Party is over, depending on how the next couple of years goes. We'll have to wait and see. But
just to clarify, Kemi, obviously, she took over from after the general election. So it's not MPs, which we had the election for 2 days ago, last Thursday. It is councillors.
Councilmen, right.
So, yeah, will council men and women. And just to double check on that figure, yeah, the Conservatives picked up 801 councillors across England. And that's down by 563. So you're right, they did lose. They could have lost more, much more, but they managed to hang on. And again, this splits for 5 parties when it used to really be 2 or maybe 3, including the Social Democrats. That's also a big change in politics. And we're probably not going to go back, in the words of Zach Polanski, the 2-party system is dead. And I've never quoted Zach Polanski before. Probably won't. Well, I think you can quote him actually sometimes, because when he says that he was a hypnotherapist and he took money to make women's boobs go bigger, and then he said, "No, I didn't take money for it," but obviously he did it. And things like this, but he seems to resonate with a lot of the young left-wing socialist and Marxist students across the country, and also older people. They love him.
Right. Well, to make another quote from him, when he was asked if he thought Israel should have a right to exist, he responded, "Why should they?" And in fact, he's never even set foot in Israel. So maybe it's time he came and brought some of his Jewish members with him.
Oh, I don't think so.
No, ever come, right? He won't set foot in the country.
Well, I have to tell you something, because we know of some members of his family. So Zach Polanski is a Jewish person, as he keeps telling. I'm Jewish, so I have the right to, I've earned the right to say, you know, I don't like Judaism, or I don't like Israel, or I don't like Israelis, or something like that, which is difficult to fight against, except when it comes down to the fact that members of his family, and I'm not mentioning any names here, but members of his family have actually decided to separate from him because of his extreme views. He was once part of the Liberal Democrat Party. In fact, there's a video floating around, which I've put out again on my social media platforms, X and Facebook and Instagram. And that is that he was just talking at one of the party conferences of Liberal Democrats, and he was talking such nonsense. It was just, he was babbling on. He made himself look such a fool. It's real cringe stuff. But yet, that's him.
It doesn't matter.
According to a member of his family, he was actually a Zionist. He was very pro-Israel. He loved Israel. And he was brought up in a Jewish family. He liked Israel. That was part of his DNA. And some say that he saw an opening in the market in other words, a Jew, to head a party that would turn against Israel and Judaism. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And he managed to win the nomination to lead the Green Party. And the deputy Green Party member is the Islamist radical who's said some very vile things, even as late as last November, which I had on video, which has talked about Sharia law and all sorts of extreme stuff against Israel. So you've got the Jew and the Muslim who are leading the Green Party, and yet they've found this niche within the political system in England, which is, as a result, bringing them lots and lots of votes. So it's difficult to really work this out, whether he's now self-hypnotized himself into believing these are exactly what I believe and my personal DNA and what I stand for, but he has made this U-turn. A bit like Tucker Carlson, but in a different league, of course. Tucker Carlson was somebody who was very pro-Israel. So was Candace Owen, very pro-Israel.
That's right.
And now their entire material is just to demonize Israel and anyone who supports Israel. And sadly, when it happens to a Jewish person, it's even worse than anyone else, because there's something engraved within the Jewish person that can actually go really, really extreme. So there's nothing worse than a Jewish Marxist, which is pretty much what Zach Polanski is. I mean, Karl Marx was a Jew, I'm told. He wrote many, many books. Somebody pointed out to me 25 years ago and showed me one of his books that he wrote, the Jew was a cancer. The Jew was equivalent to a rat. There was another word, vermin. That was the word he used. And the world would never have peace until that vermin was gotten rid of in the world.
Unbelievable, right.
And yet this is, so you do have other people very much like this. And it's a problem that some people have with some Jewish people, some Israeli Jewish people inside of Israel. Their hatred for Judaism and religion, whereby that they, when Yom Kippur comes along, that you have to have a meal in the garden or at the front where everyone can see you, or you have to have bread on the Passover. You know, this, to really stick it to everyone else and to campaign. I mean, you know, if you want to do it, fine, you do it. It's shame, but you want to go ahead and do it. You can't hold yourself back. But to really stick it to everyone else, look at me, I'm doing this. This is what you should be doing. You should be doing this. And sadly, I know people like that in Israel. And that's also, where'd you get that from? No, you want to go to the synagogue on the Shabbat? Okay, I want to drive to the beach on a Shabbat. I don't care what you do. You don't care what I do. But really, if you're going to the synagogue on the Shabbat, wow, that makes me. Don't you understand what you're doing? Have you lost your mind of this type of craziness and this? I can't even find the word.
Well, they're very attached. It shows their attachment to what they hate, that they're very attached to it. So if we could just flip it to the other side, they'd probably be very good Jews and very, very passionate Jews about what they do. So in some ways, there's more possibilities for them than for the Jew who's completely indifferent, who really doesn't even know what day it is and could care less. But the ones who are sitting there with this angst, this discomfort, are the ones that actually perhaps have a little more potential. I'm not saying that's the same for the anti-Semites who are not Jewish. I think that they are just gone off the rails. But I do think that when people feel passionate about something and it flips to the other side, there is some potential for them to get back on track. They haven't gone so.
Yes, that could be. But this just explains Zach Polanski with a Jewish background, and those Jewish people from an organization, a really far extreme left-wing organization called Na'amod, that also follow him very much as well. Now, I'm not sure that everyone is Jewish over there. It could be that in some cases, just like in America, all these Jewish groups in America, that their grandfather was Jewish or their great-grandfather was Jewish, etc., etc. And therefore, as a result, so I've got Jewish blood. I'm Jewish. I hate Israel, or I'm a Holocaust survivor, and what Israel is doing is worse than the Nazis, and things like this as well. There's been a radicalization against what it is that they previously believed and thought of. So not everyone is Jewish, but clearly some of them are Jewish. And you compare that, as we're speaking about the elections, to Nigel Farage. So some people within the Jewish community are saying that Nigel Farage is also somebody to be watching out. And actually, one of the Hasidische Rebbes was talking to me about this on Friday night, because he said he was told, I'm not going to mention, I almost mentioned his name, but I'm not going to mention his name.
Okay.
But he was told that by one of his followers that Nigel Farage was stopping Shkita. And so I said, oh, you don't want to believe this. He said, no, let's hear. And brought him over right there and there. Come over here. So we were in a circle of like six
Wow.
or seven. I was the only one without a Strymor around this circle. And I said, look, where did you hear that from? And he couldn't. I said, I heard it. I said, look, this is absolute nonsense. Let's just clarify. And I'm pretty good at this in some aspects, because when you hear about certain rumors, you want to look into it and clarify certain things. So when it came to Shlita, what he said was several years ago, and I'm surprised it's come up again, because to the best of my knowledge, it has not come up at all. Nobody's asked him about it, Nigel Farage, and he hasn't made any comments about this. Several years ago, there was a video that came out of how the Muslims were doing their slaughtering of animals, halal. And of course, it's not the same as Shlita. Jewish people do not eat halal, but actually Muslims do eat kosher food.
Right.
Because they're satisfied with how it's all done. And you do have Muslims coming to the Jewish area of Golders Green, to a number of the butchers, and buying their meats. I don't know how they can afford it, because it's very, very expensive, but nevertheless, they are doing so. In this particular case, several years ago, and I saw this video, and they were, in one particular case, it was clearly not halal. They do stun the animals, number one. And number two is that they weren't dying, so they were being hit over the heads, etc. So this is clearly cruelty to animals. And that's what Nigel Farage was referring to at the time, that we have to stop this practice. He was not saying this about Shechita. And if he's discussed this with people, and he's got a very close team around him, very professional team, some of them are Jewish people, I know some of them very, very well. When this comes up, he will be explained exactly how the process works, and if he might even want to go along to one of these slaughtering plants. There's a few here in the UK, and in England rather, and then one or two of them in Europe, one of them specifically in Poland. So that's one issue. The other issue is that when he was 10 years old, so this is going back to the early 1970s, when he joined high school, apparently he said, because 3 or 4 school members of this particular school back in the early 1970s, and I'm about the same age as Nigel Farage, so I remember the language at that time. So he said a few things about Jewish people, and he apparently mentioned the gas chambers a few times. Pretty horrible stuff. But you know what? In the 1970s, this was a language around at the time when we were 10 and 11 years old. And many of us use certain words towards other ethnic minorities, towards Indians and Pakistanis. They used it against Jews. It was used against blacks. There were TV shows on at the time. In the 1970s, ITV had a show called Love Thy Neighbor. A black couple and a white couple moved in with each other. It was on mainstream television in the UK. In the days, there was only 3 television channels. The black person, the black man, was actually saying to the white man, white honky. And the white man was saying to the black man, the N-word. And that was going out once a week.
Wow.
And it was a very, very topical and very popular. That would never be shown again. You'll never see any of those reruns.
Right.
But people who were old enough to watch Love Thy Neighbor in those days, by the way, the black woman and the black man, they were best of friends. They used to always get together and sit down and talk about things. But it was just a comedy. And it was funny. That was the language in those days. Of course, it's changed since that time. And of course, we look back. I mean, women weren't allowed to go into a pub or into a restaurant after 11 o'clock. They weren't allowed to go into a restaurant after 11 o'clock at night and order themselves a cup of coffee. That was the law up until about 1981 or 82. So in other words, if there was an all-night coffee shop, they could not actually sit at a table by themselves without a man and order a cup of coffee.
I remember recently seeing a clip about that they were considered wanton women and they had to leave.
Yeah, I put it out. It was a BBC thing, because that was the law at the time, that you couldn't serve prostitutes. Well, she's not a prostitute.
Right.
How do you know she's not a prostitute? But yet, if she's sitting with her pimp, that will be okay to serve them. I mean, it's just a ludicrous law.
Yeah.
But it was an old law, and obviously it was changed. So we lived in different times at that time. So those people calling Nigel Farage, watch him, you be very careful with him. He's an anti-Semite. I don't trust Nigel Farage. As far as I'm concerned, he has put his neck out for the support of Israel and the support of Jewish people and the Jewish community. And he came down to Golders Green last week. He was just up the road from where I'm sitting right now, and speaking with a number of the local community people. And as I said, Jewish people are as well as Muslims. Muslims are also standing in places, or they were for the local elections, and will be when the general election comes along, standing for members of parliament. So you know what? There's a lot of rumors around. There's a lot of people that wish to say things behind the background, behind the backs, especially in election. America, it's always dirty. Israel, election coming up. So far, it's scheduled for the 27th of October, Tuesday, the 27th of October, unless the government wishes to bring it forward. But it's going to be a very, very dirty election there. That's what things are said. You throw things, you throw out lies, and you try and get people to believe them so they will vote for you. I don't like that politics. It's a dirty business, but it is what it is.
Yeah.